Well, good morning, New Hope. You know, Christmas is such a wonderful time. I love the Christmas season, but I got to tell you, there are things about the Christmas season that are difficult. There are times when we feel, many of us, especially around this time of the year, like things are just rough. Life is filled with trials and tests and tragedies sometimes. For some, there's memories of things gone by, tragedies gone by. For some of us, those things may be happening right now, those difficulties. And this time of year can often bring up those memories of those trials and tragedies. And so the holiday season can cause us to think of all kinds of things, cause us to stress over all kinds of things, cause us to focus maybe on friends, family, loved ones that are no longer here, cause us to focus maybe on strained relationships, maybe even cause us to focus on personal failures. What the past has brought to us, how we've messed up. The story of Israel, as we've been going through Genesis and now Exodus, the story of Israel is a story of failure and sometimes success, but it's a story of people going through tests and trials and tragedies and triumph. But before the triumph, there must always come the tests and the trials, the hardships, the difficulties. And as we pick up the story of God's people in Exodus, we've been through Genesis, now we're in Exodus, we will see a story of some bitter trial that God's people are going to go through. God will take them and allow them to go through some terrible, terrible time of trial and testing, suffering and pain and hardship. We saw God recently use an unlikely hero, Joseph, to rescue God's people through Egypt. After Joseph died, things gradually went worse. Under Joseph's leadership, they settled in Egypt. The Israelites grew in numbers. But after Joseph died, a Pharaoh who knows not Joseph came along. And there was no mediator between the people of Israel and Egypt without Joseph in the picture. Their numbers grew, in fact, so large that they began to threaten Egypt's leadership. Pharaoh himself felt threatened and made them into slaves, forcing them to build the famous monoliths and monuments of Egypt that we're so familiar with, the pyramids and things like that. And as the people suffered, the question began to be, what happened to all of God's promises? What happened to God's faithfulness? What happened to God's great upper story plan for building a nation? Did God lose control? Did he mess up? Did he slip? See, more than 500 years before any of this took place, God told Abraham that this would happen. 500 years before. Genesis 15:3 reads this way: Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and they will be slaves there. And they will be afflicted for 400 years. Guess what happened? It's like God knew the future or something. And so the question becomes, what good could possibly come out of God taking the Israelites through these horrible things to save them, spare them from famine and hunger through Egypt, only to make them slaves? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Have you ever been there in your life? You pray to God, you trust God, you're faithful, you step out in faith. God leads you, or so you think. But then when times of trial come, you begin to think, was he really leading me? Is that really what he wanted? Because if he did, why would he have brought me through everything he's brought me through, only to bring me to this place that I'm at right now that makes no sense? I thought the story was just going to keep going up. And it did for a while, but then it kind of plateaued and just crashed. Ever been there in your life? Where is God? Why would God do that? What good could possibly come out of spending a lifetime being mistreated as slaves? A nation held in captivity for 400 years. See, when we're talking about trials and tests and triumph, the first thing that comes to mind is the trouble with trials. See, we can talk about trials all the time, but when they really come, that's when the rubber kind of meets the road. And this is, by the way, exactly the time when you and I will be tempted to walk away from God. You will either, as you go through trials, as God allows you to go through testing, you will either get bitter or you'll get better. One of the two. I don't know if you knew this, but for those of you who have children, it's this difficult struggle of wanting on one side to have a good relationship with our children, wanting them to like us, and on the other side, being the parents we need to be, speaking the hard things, doing the hard things, right? That you know is going to bring them pain. And so here's what we do, and this is the mistake we often make as parents. I know I've made it countless times. We sacrifice the greater good of our children, the ultimate greater good of our children, on the altar of temporary relationship with them. I can't say that to them. I can't allow them to go through this pain. I can't do this. Not so with God. Not so with God. God is the perfect parent. He is a good, loving parent, and love does hard things. Oh, but my kids will hate me. Maybe. See, the question becomes, if God is good and all-powerful, why does he allow us to go through suffering, pain, trials, misery sometimes? And so because that question is unanswered, many walk away from God, bitter, calloused, cynical, pessimistic. They have this victim mentality. You know what? God never cared about me anyway. If he did, he wouldn't allow this and this and that. And if that's the kind of God there is, then I don't want to serve him anyway. So they have this victim mentality, or they just get angry, or they get aloof. And then there's the other side. Then there's some who just, going through these trials, get a tough skin. They simply say to themselves, well, I guess life is just miserable. Life is miserable, and if you want to get ahead, you got to look out for number one, because it's a hard, cold, cruel world out there. And that's the wrong approach too. Both approaches are wrong. J.I. Packer's one of the most influential British-born theologians, and he said this: patience does not just grin and bear things stoic-like, but rather it accepts them cheerfully as therapeutic workouts planned by a heavenly trainer who is resolved to get you up to full fitness. Isn't that something? Think about that for a minute. I mean, those of you who hit the weights at the gym, you realize that this pain is going to result in some kind of health. Accept them cheerfully as therapeutic workouts planned by a heavenly trainer who is resolved to get you up to full fitness. Wow. So, question this morning: have your trials made you better or bitter? See, enduring trials takes courage and it takes perseverance, which only come through maturity. You got to be mature to have courage, to have perseverance, to have perspective. You know what our problem is often? My problem is often? Is that I tend to confuse a good life with an easy life. The two are not the same. Good and easy are not synonymous, no matter what all the commercials say. See, we are bent, especially in the United States, because we're in such a blessed country, full of prosperity. We are bent on the idea of everything easy, everything quick, everything convenient. I don't want to have to get up to go to the restaurant for them to serve me my food. I'm going to call and have somebody deliver it. To the point, we've got it so easy. We're not gathering firewood to look for warmth. We're not worried about clothing, most of us. We're not worried about housing, most of us. We're not worried about... We've come to the point now where we find it tedious and a drudgery just to try to maintain entertaining ourselves 24/7. That's often where we find ourselves. Easy, in fact, not only is not to be synonymous with good, easy is often the enemy of good. Easy is often the enemy of good. So let me share with you for a moment, if I could, a bit of the theology of testing. What does God's word say about testing? Trials in the Bible are often called tests because they examine the strength and the quality of our faith. That's what a test is, of course. It's an examination, right? Whether it's examining your history knowledge or your math skills, these kind of tests are examining your spiritual strength, the quality of your faith. Now, to get this theologically straight, I want you to understand something. Tests are not the same as temptations. Tests are not the same as temptations. Now, sometimes a test can include a temptation, but the two are not the same. Temptations are intended for evil, to trip us up. They're usually brought about by Satan. But tests are intended for our good, to make us mature, and they are allowed by God. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3 says, "The crucible is for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord," what? "Tests the hearts." So the intended result of this testing is your maturity, your steadfastness. A life of faithful endurance, no matter what the trials are. In trials, the soul is refined. And the strength of our conviction is proven. Trials test the practical application of our theoretical faith. You notice how theory and practice don't always go together so much? Trials test the practical application of our theoretical faith. Trials produce for us and in us endurance. And you can measure a man by the degree of opposition it takes to discourage him. When what we believe and claim we believe survives trial, then it becomes conviction. Moves from mere belief to conviction. Conviction is a belief that is proven under trial. So, a life of ease, a life of comfort is not our highest good. And for you parents, a life of ease and comfort and blessing and riches is not the best thing for your kids. Okay? It's not. You really love your kids, let them suffer a bit. And it's fun. During trial, you know what the hardest part is often during trial? Almost any kind of trial. It's the waiting, the not knowing, the uncertainty. That's the most difficult part. Ben Patterson, who's a pastor and contributing editor to Christianity Today, said, waiting is not just the thing we have to do until we get what we hope for. Catch this part. Waiting is actually the process of becoming what we hope for. Waiting is the process of becoming what we hope for. See, God allows us to go through trials. Why? Because He loves us. He loves us. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5 through 7. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. For it is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? You see that? God loves you like a son, so He's disciplining you. He's allowing you to go through trials. So there are things to be learned while waiting. Catch this part. There are things to be learned while waiting in that moment of uncertainty, that moment of unrest, that moment of waiting that cannot be learned at any other time in any other way. It's the waiting and the uncertainty. See? And these lessons strengthen faith. They give us deeper ability to rely on God without having to be anxious. Wouldn't you like to? Wouldn't you like to, in the times of suffering and trial and uncertainty and not knowing, get to the point where you can trust God without anxiety? Wouldn't that be something? The purpose of trials is to make us what? Disciplined. Discipline's a dirty word nowadays. I don't know if you know that. Nobody, like discipline, we don't do I don't do the whole discipline thing, right? Discipline's a dirty word nowadays. But discipline is essential to sanctification. Discipline is choosing, you know what discipline is? If you want to write this down, this is good. I wrote this down. This isn't from me. That's why it's good, because it's not from me. But I heard this a while ago. Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Isn't that a great definition of discipline? Discipline is simple. It's just the decision choosing between what you want now and what you want most. What I want most is to be healthy and fit. What I want now is pie. Discipline. So how do we take all these tragedies, all these lessons, all these trials, and turn them into triumph? How do we turn tragedy into triumph when it hits us like it hit the Israelites? Most of us, how most of us respond during times of testing and trial? The first thing we ask is usually, why? Why, Lord? Why? Rather than asking why, can I encourage you to start asking how? How am I to endure this? What lessons, Lord, did you have for me? What have you meant for me to learn through this? How should I change through this trial? James 1:2-4 says, "Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing." So I want you to understand this passage a little bit, because many of us read this and go, yeah, count it all joy. Great. Yeah, how am I supposed to do that? That's a nice passage. How am I supposed to do that? Here's how you're supposed to do it. The joy is not necessarily in the pain of the trial, okay? He's not saying for you to be masochistic. What he's saying is that, listen, you can even in the midst of trial have joy. Why? Not for the trial itself, but because you know what it's going to produce. Steadfastness, right? And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. What's steadfastness? Well, devotion, loyalty, dependability, dedication, commitment. It's very much like discipline. How do we endure in the midst of trials? Godly wisdom is the key to enduring in the midst of trials. God-given discernment, God-given perspective is the key. James chapter 1, verses 5 through 6. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him do what? Ask God. Let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask with faith, without doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave on the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. So if you lack wisdom, ask God. Wisdom on how to endure trials. You know what faith is? Faith is ultimately comes down to confidence in God based on his character, not the situation of the moment, not your present circumstances. Faith is ultimately confidence in God based on his character. You know what doubt is? Vacillating between trusting in God and trusting in the world or relying on yourself. That's vacillating. I'm not sure if I can trust this God guy. Maybe I can trust him this far, but not this far. Maybe I need to take matters into my own hands. C.S. Lewis said, faith is the art of holding on to the things your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods. Did you catch that? Faith is the art of holding on to the things that your reason has once accepted in spite of your changing moods. Isn't that something? So what's the key to having this joy in trials that it's talking about? Very quickly. Our ultimate source of joy ultimately has to be our salvation. The fact that no matter what this life brings to us, it is well with my soul. Jesus himself, Scripture says, for the joy set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame. We have to have joy by learning to see trials as opportunities to grow in spiritual maturity, just like Israel had to be taught certain lessons. If we can see trials as opportunities to grow in spiritual maturity, then we will have joy. Only, of course, if we value growing in spiritual maturity, that is. Romans chapter 5, verses 3 to 4. Not only that, but we rejoice, catch this, in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces what? Endurance. And endurance produces character. And character produces hope. James L. Christensen said, the purpose of Christianity is not to avoid conflict or difficulty, but to produce a character adequate to meet difficulty when it comes. It does not make life easy. Rather, it tries to make us great enough for life. So what happens? You know, there's on one side of it the trials that make sense. Yeah, I understand God wants me to go through this. I can see how this is going to mature me. What happens when we go through the trials that don't make sense? Those are the tough ones, right? When we think God is leading us, and we've been following, and we've been faithful, and we've been patient, and he's taken us to a place, and we think we're almost getting there, and then boom, the bottom falls out of our lives. How about going through the trials that make no sense? How about tragedies that seem senseless, missed opportunities, purposeless suffering, things that have no happy ending? Did you know that God can even use, catch this, God can even use the devil's own desire to destroy us in order to build us up for his own good? Revelation 2:10. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, And for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, then I will give you the crown of life. You see how God is even using the things that the devil does? Jesus even allowed himself to be tempted by the devil purposely. 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 21. For to this you have been called. See, now anytime a sentence begins that way, I go, what? To this you have been called? I got to hear the end of that. That's going to be good. What have I been called to? Let's hear it. Because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you, an example that you might follow in his steps. Wait a minute, I've been called to that? Whoa, time out. I thought this Christianity thing was a ticket out of pain and suffering. I thought this Christianity thing was going to be happily ever after. All my problems are gone. Sucker. No, it's going to be tough. But the end is coming. That's why we always say, good news is you're going to die soon. God uses these things to shape us so we might follow in his steps. Learning to endure trials is an absolutely essential part of becoming a mature Christian. Listen, if you have not learned to endure hardship, hard work, trial, boredom, difficulty, pain, you will never be a mature Christian until you learn to do that. Christianity will not make your problems go away. In fact, it will often bring more. Charles Spurgeon said, the Lord's mercy often rides to the door of our heart upon the black horse of affliction. You familiar with that horse? Is he ridden by your door a time or two? Jesus said in John 16:33, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. But take heart, I've overcome the world. We won't always have the answers to why God allows particular trials. But we know that we can trust him. No matter how bad this world is, no matter how bad our life gets, Jesus has overcome the world. And this perspective allows us to transcend trials. James chapter 1:12, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive a crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. Joy is not dependent on the present circumstances of this world. It is not dependent upon the things happening to you and around you in this life. In fact, Christianity teaches us exactly the opposite. Isn't that interesting? We spend our lives trying to make our world around us just so. Our careers, our relationships, the car we drive, where we live, the things we possess. We make these things, we just arrange and we dust and we place and this is so, I think this is good now. And we try to live there. But Christianity is contrary to that. Christianity teaches the opposite. C.S. Lewis says, I didn't go to religion to make me happy. I always knew a bottle of port would do that. If you want a religion to make you feel really comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity. C.S. Lewis. 1 Peter 1, verses 6 through 7. Last passage of the day. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials. Why? So that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though tested by fire, may be found to result in what? Praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. The tested genuineness of your faith may be found to result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Why? Because real joy, real peace, real hope is not based on our present circumstances. Real joy, real peace, real hope is ultimately based on our relationship with Him.
Thank you for showing me that our journey isn't one of comfort or ease, or marked with proven signs, but grace-laden and costly. I've learned through your gentle smile and constant grace that the tune of life is found in a melody of faith, hope, and love. And when the storms of life came and faith was tested, I saw that real strength is found not in power, but in weakness. And when doubts arose in the place of deepest need, your humble presence always echoed a much greater love, one that knows no bounds, a refuge, a glimpse of hope. And when I held my shadows close and darkness was my only company, there you were to chase my shadows into the light. And you led me to dance in the melodies I thought had long since vanished. You taught me that while I feel it, I am not alone. There is one who walks alongside us, who has weathered the journey and endured, whose grace holds us in our darkest hour. He guides my steps when the path has forsaken me. The scars on his hands are proof that love will lead us to places beyond our will. And those same gracious scars remind us of the deeper purpose that's found there. And woven throughout your story was always the simple truth. The depth of life is in the mountains and valleys. And real joy is found not in circumstance, but in Him.
Father, would you remind us that real joy is found in you, not in the things happening around us. Lord, some of us right now are just enjoying the Christmas season, having fun with friends and family. Life's good, but Lord, some of us are going through a season of deep pain. Questions stir in our minds. Why would you allow these things? Why don't you rescue? Why don't you deliver? Lord, thank you for loving us enough to allow us to go through the trials, the tests, the sorrow, the sleepless nights, the difficult circumstances, the pain of loss, the uncertainty of tomorrow, the troubles of today. Knowing that these things are necessary to produce in us maturity, discernment, perspective, patience, steadfastness, discipline. That we need to become more like Jesus. Lord, remind us that it's worth it. Lord, we confess this morning that sometimes it is hard to see what you are doing. There are times when we don't understand why you would allow us to go through what we're experiencing. Lord, would you give us the wisdom and the perspective to see all our trials as gifts from you, to find joy in the midst of pain, to have the perspective that thanks you for allowing these things to shape us, to mold us into the image of your Son. Lord, thank you for helping us to find victory in the midst of despair, for turning tragedy into triumph, for overcoming this world to make us more than conquerors through your Son, Jesus Christ. It is for his glory and in his name that we ask these things. Amen.